I died with her name on my lips, frozen blood staining the snow beneath me. Then I opened my eyes 5 years earlier, my death scream still echoing in my chest. I remember everything. How she married me when I was just a rising soldier, then abandoned me the moment the second prince noticed her beauty. She left me without a backward glance, trading our modest home for palace luxury while I was exiled to fight barbarians on the northern border. They mocked me as the fool who lost his wife to royalty. No one saw my tears or heard my prayers for her safety, even as I died defending the empire that cast me aside. This time would be different. This time, when she comes begging for protection, after her prince dies, she'll find a man who remembers every betrayal, a man who smiles when she kneels. The snow was still falling in my vision when I opened my eyes, gasping for breath. My hands instinctively clutched at my chest, searching for the barbarian spear that had been there moments ago. Instead, I felt only the soft silk of my bedding, my room, my old room in the capital city. I sat up slowly, disoriented by the absence of pain. On my desk lay freshly sealed commission papers, the same ones I had received 5 years ago. 5 years before my death on the northern border. I stumbled to the small bronze mirror hanging on the wall. The face that stared back was younger, unscarred by war and betrayal. I traced the smooth skin where a barbarian axe should have left its mark. Heaven was cruel and generous indeed. I had been given a second chance. That evening, I attended the summer solstice celebration at the Imperial Palace as I had before, and there she was, Lady May, daughter of House Lin. Her laughter like silver bells as she charmed the circle of nobles around her. In my first life, this was the night I had fallen hopelessly in love, stumbling over my words as I asked to refill her wine cup. The memory of her lips against my ear flashed forward. You were good to me, but I was born for palaces, not a general's quarters. Followed by the cold dismissal. The second prince has promised me position and security. What can you offer but a soldier's uncertain future? I watched her now from across the courtyard, beautiful and innocent seeming in her blue silk robes. In the shadowed pavilion beyond, Prince Wei Jingzhuan observed her with the same calculated interest I remembered. The pieces were already in motion. This time, when May's eyes found mine across the courtyard, I didn't blush or stumble forward. I held her gaze coolly, then turned away. Commander Zhou, a voice called behind me. I turned to find General Lin, May's father. Your daughter is as radiant as always, General, I said, bowing respectfully. She has been asking about you, he replied with a meaningful smile. Your victory at Serpent River has caught many ears at court. So it begins again, I thought. But this time, I would be the one writing our story. I spent the next week in careful contemplation, weighing what I knew of this timeline against what I had lived. In my first life, I had pursued May with the earnest devotion of a man who believed love conquered all. Now I understood that in the imperial court, power was the only currency that mattered. When I finally called upon General Lin's household, I brought not poetry as I had before, but military maps and a detailed strategy for defending the empire's western border. The general invited me to stay for dinner. My daughter will be pleased to see you again, he said, his eyes calculating the advantage of a connection to a rising military star. May entered wearing spring green, her hair adorned with silver bells that chimed softly as she walked. She offered me tea with hands that trembled slightly. I remembered how I had once thought that trembling was maiden's shyness. Now I recognized it as careful performance. Commander Zhou, she murmured, Father says you have become the Emperor's favored general after just one campaign. Fortune favors the prepared, I replied, maintaining a polite distance, though titles mean little without substance behind them. Her eyes widened slightly at my reserve. In my previous life, I had practically fallen at her feet at this first private meeting, composing embarrassing verses about her beauty. The change in script clearly intrigued her. They say you predicted the enemy movement at Serpent River, she ventured. That you knew exactly where they would cross, as if you had seen it before. I met her gaze directly. Perhaps I have lived many lives, Lady May. Perhaps I remember what others forget. A small crease appeared between her brows. You speak in riddles, Commander. No, I said. I speak in truths most are unwilling to hear. Our courtship progressed swiftly after that. Unlike before, I did not spend my salary on jade hairpins and silk robes for May. Instead, I invested in connections with court officials and cultivated allies among the Imperial Guard. When I did bring her gifts, they were practical tokens: a finely crafted dagger small enough to hide in a sleeve, maps of the palace with evacuation routes marked in red. "What strange gifts you bring," she said once, turning the dagger over in her hands. "The future is uncertain," I replied. "I would have you prepared for any path it takes." We were married in early autumn, when red leaves drifted across the imperial city. The ceremony was modest, befitting a military officer and the daughter of a fading noble house. May wore red and gold, and I saw in her eyes the calculations she was making, the future she was plotting, where this marriage was merely a first step toward greater glory. After the guests departed, we sat alone in our new home. She poured rice wine with graceful hands and smiled at me from beneath lowered lashes. "Husband," she said softly, "I will make you proud." I took her hand and felt the old pull of her beauty, the ghost of my first life's devotion, but I remembered the coldness of her farewell when she left me for the prince, the absence of her at my deathbed. "You will make a fine officer's wife," I told her, my voice like silk over steel. "But never mistake me for a stepping stone again." She laughed, confused. What an odd thing to say. "Consider it a promise," I replied, taking her hand. "I won't be the man you expect." That night, as May slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and reviewed the board before me. The second prince would make his move soon. Court factions would shift and realign, and somewhere to the north, barbarian tribes were gathering for the same invasion that had claimed my life. This time I would not be the piece sacrificed. This time, I held the brush that would write our fate. Our wedding ceremony was as modest as I remembered. House Lynn had prestige but little wealth remaining. May was resplendent in her red bridal clothes, her smile never quite reaching her eyes as she performed the tea ceremony. I wondered if she already dreamed of greater heights, or if that ambition would grow only later. In the months that followed, I moved differently through the world. Where once I had been merely talented, now I was unstoppable, choosing battles I knew could be won, anticipating enemy movements with uncanny precision, gaining recognition that had taken years in my previous life. The Emperor himself presented me with a sort of office after I crushed a border rebellion in half the time expected. May wore her pleasure openly then, reveling in the envious glances of court ladies who had once dismissed her husband as a common-born officer. "You're different lately," she said one night as we lay in bed. "More calculating." "War changes a man," I answered simply. "It's as though you can see the future," she mused, tracing the muscles of my arm. "As though you're always 3 steps ahead." I said nothing, but watched the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was beginning to see my value, not just as a path to comfort, but as a true power at court. It wouldn't be enough, I knew, but it was a beginning. In my first life, I had spent these early marriage years desperately trying to please May, working myself to exhaustion for promotions that might impress her, spending every coin on luxuries to make her smile. This time, I invested in myself. I trained with master swordsmen. I studied ancient military texts. I built a network of loyal men who owed me their lives or fortunes. May adjusted her strategy accordingly. She became the perfect military wife. Hosting dinners for influential officials, charming the wives of court ministers, playing the role of devoted spouse with flawless precision. If she was disappointed that I didn't shower her with gifts and flattery as before, she hid it well. "The Minister of War's wife asked about you again today," she told me one evening as she combed her hair. "She says her husband speaks highly of your tactical mind." "And what did you tell her?" I asked, watching her reflection in the mirror. "That my husband's mind belongs to the emperor and his heart to me," she replied with a practiced smile. I allowed myself a small laugh. "You're becoming quite the strategist yourself." Her eyes met mine in the mirror. I learned from the best. Spring turned to summer, and with it came the seasonal court gatherings where nobles displayed their wealth and curried imperial favor. At the Dragon Boat Festival, I found myself elevated to a position near the emperor's viewing platform, an honor that would have left me stammering with gratitude in my previous life. Now I accepted it as my due. Maid sat among the higher-ranked ladies, her silk robes more elaborate than we could truly afford. I noticed how often her eyes drifted toward the imperial family's section, where the second prince sat in splendid isolation, following his older brother's recent illness. The crown prince had been bedridden for weeks with a mysterious ailment that court physicians struggled to identify. Whispers of poison circulated among the court, though none dared speak them aloud. I knew from my past life that the crown prince would recover this time, only to fall fatally ill 2 years later. As the boat races concluded, I felt a presence at my shoulder. The second prince had descended from his platform and now stood beside me, his ornate robes making mine look plain by comparison. "Commander Joe," he said with practiced charm, "your reputation grows more impressive by the day." I bowed precisely, the required depth, no more, no less. "Your Highness honors me with his notice." "Not at all," he said, waving a jade-ringed hand. "It is the duty of princes to recognize talent in the empire." His eyes drifted to where May sat with the other women, and to recognize beauty as well. I followed his gaze and saw May quickly lower her eyes, a flush spreading across her cheeks. In my previous life, this had been the beginning of the end, the first time the prince had noticed my wife, setting in motion the events that would lead to my exile and death. "My wife is indeed fortunate to have been blessed with both beauty and intelligence," I replied evenly. "A fortunate man," the prince murmured. "I should like to speak with you both at the Moon Festival next month. I have positions at court that require people of talent and discretion." Before I could respond, he moved away, leaving me to consider how differently I would play this moment. In my first life, I had been pathetically grateful for royal attention, eager to serve blind to the prince's interest in my wife. This time I saw the board clearly. That evening I found May arranging her hair ornaments with particular care, her movements almost feverish with excitement. "The second prince spoke to you today," she said, aiming for casualness and missing by a wide margin. "He did," I confirmed, removing my court robes. "What did he say?" she pressed, abandoning pretense. "He admired your beauty and spoke of court positions," I said, watching her face closely. "The same empty flattery he offers to a dozen ambitious officials each month." Her expression faltered. "It wasn't empty. He specifically sought you out. He sought to determine if I would be complacent about his interest in you," I corrected her. "As many powerful men have tested many husbands before him." Her eyes widened in genuine surprise, then narrowed. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing yet," I said, sitting beside her. "But at the Moon Festival he will learn that unlike other men, I do not consider my wife a stepping stone for advancement." "What do you mean?" she asked, suddenly wary. I took her hand, feeling the slight tremor beneath her skin. "I mean that we rise together or not at all, May. I will not be discarded when a better option presents itself." "I would never," she began, but I placed a finger gently against her lips. "Intentions change when power beckons," I said softly. "But remember this. I have seen more of the future than you might believe. And in that future, those who betray me find only ruin in the end." She pulled away from me, her expression a complexing mixture of fear, calculation, and something like respect. "You truly are not the man I thought I married," she whispered. "No." I smiled slightly. "I am the man who died for you once already. I won't make that mistake again." The Autumn Moon Festival arrived, marking the moment when everything had changed in my first life. As expected, the second prince made his appearance at the imperial gardens, surrounded by his usual coterie of sycophants and bodyguards. Unlike before, I didn't leave May's side even for a moment. When the prince approached with his practiced charm and elegant poetry, I stood firm beside my wife. "Commander Joe," Prince Wei greeted me with forced warmth. "Your recent victories have brought great honor to the Empire." I bowed precisely the required depth, no more, no less. "Your Highness honors me with his notice, and this must be Lady May," he continued, his eyes lingering on my wife's face. "I've heard tales of her beauty, but they fall short of the reality." Before May could respond with the flattered words I knew she would offer, I spoke. "Your Highness honors us with his attention, but my wife and I have pledged ourselves only to each other and the throne itself." The prince's smile froze. May's fingers dug into my arm with bruising force. "How admirably loyal," the prince finally said, his eyes hardening. "Loyalty is a virtue I value highly." That night, May's anger erupted like a thunderstorm. "What were you thinking?" she hissed, throwing her hairpins across our chamber. "Do you know who he is?" "The Emperor's second son," I replied calmly. "A man known for collecting beautiful women and discarding loyal men." Her eyes widened. "How dare you speak treason?" "It isn't treason to see clearly," I answered, catching her wrist as she moved to slap me. "And I see your ambition, May. I always have." She pulled away, her face flushed with anger and something like shame. "You know nothing of ambition. My family was once great, our name spoken with reverence throughout the Empire. Now we survive on fading glory while others rise in the Emperor's favor." "And you think the second prince is your path back to greatness?" I asked quietly. "I think you are deliberately sabotaging our future," she snapped. "A position in the prince's household would secure our place at court forever." I walked to the window, looking out at the moon that hung full and bright over the imperial city. In my experience, forever is much shorter than most people imagine. The weeks that followed were tense between us. May maintained a cold formality in our home while presenting a perfect image of marital harmony at court functions. I continued my duties, preparing for what I knew would come. The assassin arrived on the first snow of winter, earlier than in my previous life, suggesting the prince's patience had worn thinner this time. I was inspecting the garrison when a servant I didn't recognize offered me a cup of warmed wine. "A gift from an admirer, Commander," he said with a deferential bow. In my first life, I had accepted such tokens without question. This time, I noted the servant's hands, too smooth for someone of his claimed station, too steady for an innocent messenger. "I prefer to know my admirers by name," I said, making no move to take the cup. "And I prefer my wine served by those I know." A flash of uncertainty crossed the man's face. I moved faster than he expected, gripping his wrist and forcing him to keep hold of the cup. With my other hand, I drew the small dagger I now kept concealed at my belt. "Drink," I commanded softly. "Commander, I merely bring what was sent," he protested, trying to pull away. "Then you have nothing to fear from sharing it," I replied, pressing the dagger's tip against his side where others couldn't see it. "Drink, or explain to the magistrate why you refuse." Fear replaced uncertainty. The man's eyes darted around the courtyard, seeking escape and finding none. In a desperate move, he flung the cup at my face and tried to flee. I had anticipated this. Ducking the wine, I tackled him to the ground as the poisoned liquid splashed harmlessly onto the stones. Guards rushed forward at my shout, securing the would-be assassin. "Take him to the inner garrison," I ordered. "No one speaks to him but me." Persuading the assassin to reveal his employer took 3 days of carefully calculated pressure. Not torture. I had learned in my military career that pain often produces lies rather than truth. Instead, I offered him a choice between a quick execution for attempted assassination or a chance to live by revealing who had sent him. "The prince will kill me and my entire family if I speak," he finally whispered, broken. "The prince is not yet emperor," I replied, and I can ensure your family disappears to the southern provinces, where even his reach cannot find them. By the week's end, I had not just a confession but letters bearing the prince's personal seal, documents that in my previous life I would never have thought to seek. I copied them carefully before concealing the originals in a place only I knew. When I presented the evidence to the emperor's trusted eunuch, Wei Song, I did so with precision and restraint. Not a direct accusation against the royal blood, but a concerned official bringing evidence of conspiracy that appears to touch even exalted quarters. The eunuch's face remained impassive, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. These are serious matters, Commander Zhou. To implicate the imperial family, even indirectly, requires absolute certainty. I am certain only of my duty to the throne, I replied with perfect humility. I leave interpretations to wiser minds than mine. 3 days later, the imperial court hummed with the news. The second prince had been honored with governance of the southern provinces, a prestigious appointment that required his immediate departure from the capital. Only those in the innermost circles recognized it for what it was, a thinly veiled exile. When I returned home that evening, May was waiting, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "What have you done?" she demanded. "I have survived," I answered simply. "The prince leaves for the south tomorrow," she said. "Everyone says you were involved, that you somehow engineered his fall from favor." I removed my outer robe calmly. The prince engineered his own fall. I merely avoided becoming his victim. "You've ruined everything," she hissed, her beautiful face contorted with rage and disappointment. "Do you know what we could have had?" I caught her wrist as she moved to slap me. "I know exactly what you planned. This time, I chose differently." Her face paled. "This time?" I released her and turned away. "You can still be the wife of a powerful man, May, just not a prince." She stared at me, as though seeing a stranger. Perhaps she was. The man she had married both times no longer existed. In his place stood someone forged by betrayal and reborn in frozen blood. "Who are you?" she whispered. "A man who has died once for love," I replied quietly, "and who refuses to make the same mistake twice." In the 2 years that followed, I consolidated my position at court. The emperor, impressed by my loyalty and battlefield successes, appointed me commander of the Imperial Guard, a position that kept me close to the palace and far from the frozen northern border where I had died. My days became a careful dance of military duties and political maneuvering. Unlike my first life, where I had been blindly devoted to duty, I now played the long game. I cultivated relationships with the court eunuchs who held the emperor's ear. I ensured the Imperial Guard's unwavering loyalty by treating them with respect and ensuring their families were well provided for. I studied the movements of court, factions like a general studies enemy formations. May made her adjustments, as I knew she would. She played the role of devoted wife in public, hosted influential officials in our home, and seemed to abandon her princely aspirations. But I often caught her watching me with calculation in her eyes, measuring me against some invisible standard. "You should take another wife," she suggested one evening as we prepared for bed. "A secondary wife from a powerful family would strengthen your position." In my previous life, such a suggestion would have devastated me. Now I merely smiled. "Do you have someone in mind?" She named the daughter of a prominent minister, a calculated alliance that would indeed benefit my standing. "An interesting choice," I acknowledged, "but unnecessary. I prefer to rise by merit rather than marriage." "As you wish," she replied, her voice neutral. "Though it would be nice to have help managing the household as your responsibilities grow." What she meant was clear enough. She wanted a buffer between us, a way to distance herself from a husband she no longer understood while maintaining her position as first wife. I allowed her this small victory, hiring additional servants instead. The Crown Prince's sudden illness shocked the court. When he died a week later, whispers of poison circulated, though none dared speak them aloud. The second prince returned from the south, seemingly humbled by his time away from court. Commander Joe. He greeted me in the Imperial Hall, bowing, with perfect courtesy. It seems fate has elevated us both since our last meeting. Your Highness, I responded, noting the new hardness in his eyes. The heavens move in mysterious ways. That night, I whispered to May as we lay in darkness. The prince will be named crown heir within a month. When he approaches you again, and he will, remember where your loyalties lie. She stiffened beside me. You speak as though you know the future. Perhaps I do, I answered. Perhaps I've lived this life before and know how it ends for those who betray me. She was silent for a long moment. Are you threatening me, husband? I am protecting you, I corrected her. The prince is not what he seems. His path leads to destruction for all who follow him. She turned away from me then, but I felt the tension in her body, the uncertainty my words had planted. Good. Uncertainty might keep her from repeating past mistakes. As I predicted, the second prince was formally named crown heir in a lavish ceremony that stretched the imperial treasury's limits. The court realigned itself overnight, with formerly loyal officials suddenly finding reasons to praise the prince's wisdom and foresight. Through it all, I maintained a careful neutrality in public while strengthening my private safeguards. I assigned the most loyal of my men to guard our home under the guise of honoring my position. I cultivated relationships with merchants who traveled to distant provinces, establishing escape routes should they become necessary. And I watched May for signs of the betrayal I knew lived in her heart. The prince made his move at the winter solstice celebration. I had been called away to deal with a disturbance at the palace gates, a convenient emergency that separated me from my wife. When I returned, I found them speaking in a secluded alcove, their heads bent close together like lovers. I cleared my throat loudly. The prince straightened, his face a mask of practiced innocence. Commander, he said smoothly, I was just telling your wife how fortunate the Empire is to have your service. May's eyes met mine, a complex mixture of defiance and guilt in their depths. Indeed, I replied evenly, and I am fortunate to have a wife whose loyalty matches my own. The message was clear to both of them. As we walked home through streets lit with festival lanterns, May finally broke the tense silence between us. He offered me a position as his consort's lady-in-waiting. She said, her voice carefully neutral. It would place me at the heart of the palace. It would elevate our status considerably. And what did you tell him? I asked, though I knew the answer already. That I would consider it with my husband, she replied, surprising me. In my first life, she had accepted immediately, beginning her separation from me without even the courtesy of consultation. A wise answer, I said. And what do you wish to do? She hesitated, and in that moment I saw the war within her, ambition against caution, old dreams against new fears. I want to rise, she finally said. I want my family's name restored, to glory. I want to walk the palace halls as my grandmother once did. And you believe the prince offers your surest path to these things? He offers a path, she acknowledged. But recent events have made me wonder about the destination. Progress, I thought. Not loyalty, not love, but at least a recognition that the prince's favor carried danger as well as opportunity. Consider this, I said as we approached our home. The prince seeks to surround himself with beautiful women who flatter his vanity. But when danger comes, and it will, such women are the first sacrifice to save his own skin. You truly believe he is doomed, she said. Not a question, but a realization. I know it, I replied, as surely as I know the sun will rise tomorrow. That night, a messenger arrived with an imperial summons. The emperor requested my presence at dawn, an unusual hour that suggested unusual circumstances. I found the Son of Heaven alone in his private garden, looking older than his years as he fed the ornamental carp in his pond. Commander Joe, he said without preamble, my son tells me you are both loyal and perceptive. Are these fair assessments? I bowed deeply. I strive for loyalty, Your Majesty. Perception is for heaven to judge. A faint smile touched his lips. Well said. Tell me, Commander, what do you perceive about my new crown heir? This was dangerous ground. In my previous life I had stumbled here, speaking too plainly and earning the prince's enmity. This time I chose my words with extreme care. I perceive a man of great ambition and ability, I said slowly. A man who inspires strong loyalty in some and strong caution in others. Caution, the Emperor repeated, throwing another handful of food to the fish. An interesting choice of words. The weight of the throne requires caution, Your Majesty, I replied, in those who will bear it and those who serve them. The Emperor studied me for a long moment. My eldest son trusted few but listened to many. My second son listens to few and trusts even fewer. Which approach do you favor, Commander? A wise ruler knows when to trust and when to verify, I answered, and always remembers that heaven sees what men conceal. The Emperor nodded slowly. You may go, Commander, but stay alert in the coming months. The palace walls have grown thin enough to hear whispers from outside. I bowed and withdrew, understanding his meaning perfectly. The Emperor had suspicions about his son, but needed evidence before he could act. He was asking me, indirectly, to provide that evidence if I found it. As I walked back through the palace corridors, I felt the weight of foreknowledge heavy on my shoulders. In my previous life, I had been blind to the currents moving beneath the surface. Now I saw them clearly, and knew the storm they would soon become. The second prince was named crown heir as I predicted, his position seemingly unassailable. He courted new allies, different noble daughters, and made a show of reconciliation with potential rivals. I watched and waited, gathering evidence of his continued schemes. Court life accelerated after his elevation. Each day brought new appointees loyal to the prince, new edicts bearing his influence, new whispers of his plans for when he would eventually ascend the throne. The Emperor, still vigorous but increasingly withdrawn, seemed content to allow his son greater authority with each passing month. I maintained my command of the Imperial Guard, using my position to observe the shifting alliances. The prince was careful around me, maintaining a facade of respect while quietly removing my allies from positions of influence. I allowed this, knowing what was coming. In my previous life, I had been exiled to the northern border by this point, my wife already installed as a secondary consort in the prince's household. This divergence from the pattern I remembered both comforted and concerned me. I was changing fate, but walking into unknown territory as a result. You've been invited to join the prince's hunting party, May informed me one evening, her voice carefully neutral. An honor not extended to many. I looked up from the military reports I was reviewing. Indeed. And will you be joining the ladies? Who accompany the court? I have not been invited, she replied, a faint bitterness in her tone. Strange, I murmured. In the past he seemed quite taken with you. Her eyes flashed. Perhaps he recognized that I was not as easily separated from my husband as he thought. I smiled slightly at that. Or perhaps he recognized that my wife is too intelligent to be used as a mere pawn. The hunting expedition was traditionally a place where men spoke freely, away from the constraints of the palace. When the invitation came, I recognized it for what it was, either an opportunity for reconciliation or a perfect chance for an arranged accident. Possibly both, depending on how I responded to the prince's overtures. I prepared carefully, selecting guards I trusted absolutely to accompany me, arranging signals with Wei Song, the emperor's eunuch, should I not return. I also left sealed documents with a trusted friend, to be opened only in the event of my death. The hunting grounds lay 3 days' ride from the capital, in forested mountains, where imperial preserves had been maintained for generations, the Maim. Prince was resplendent in hunting clothes of green and gold, a jeweled bow at his side more for show than function. I wore the practical attire of a soldier, drawing subtle sneers from the courtiers but approving nods from the actual huntsman. For 2 days the hunt proceeded without incident. The prince was surprisingly skilled with his bow, bringing down a deer at impressive distance. I congratulated him sincerely, and he accepted with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. On the Third day he requested that I join him alone to track a particular stag that had been sighted near the mountain stream. "Just you and I, Commander," he said with an easy smile. "Like brothers in arms." I agreed, noting how his personal guards exchanged glances. As we rode into the deeper forest, I maintained a careful awareness of our surroundings, of the distance, back to camp, of the prince's hands and their proximity to his weapons. We stopped beside the stream to water our horses. The prince dismounted gracefully and gestured for me to join him. "Beautiful country," he remarked, looking at the mist rising from the valleys below. "Peaceful." "Indeed, Your Highness," I agreed, standing slightly to his side, never directly behind him. "A welcome respite from court intrigue." He laughed softly. "You find court life distasteful, Commander? Many would say it is the heart of civilization. Many have not spent years in border garrisons," I replied. "There, a man's word and his sword arm are all that matter. Intrigue is a luxury afforded to those with walls around them." The prince studied me curiously. "You are not what I expected, Joe. When I first noticed you, I thought you merely another ambitious officer, climbing rank by any means necessary. And now? Now I see a man who understands power, but does not covet it for its own sake." He turned to face me fully. "That makes you either very wise or very dangerous." I met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps both, Your Highness." "Indeed." He moved to the stream edge, bending to scoop water in his hand. "I've been thinking about your wife recently." My body tensed involuntarily. "Not in the way you fear," he added, noticing my reaction. "I admired her beauty once, it's true. But now I find myself admiring her loyalty to you. Despite opportunities to advance herself at court, she remains steadfastly by your side." "We made vows," I said simply. "Vows," he repeated, letting the water drip through his fingers. "So fragile, yet some find them unbreakable." He stood, turning to me with a different expression, more calculating. "I need loyal men, Commander. Men who understand both duty and ambition." "The Emperor has my loyalty," I replied carefully. "The Emperor is aging," he said bluntly. "Within a year, perhaps 2, I will sit on the dragon throne. Those loyal to me now will find themselves well placed in the new era." And there it was, the same offer that had led to my downfall in my previous life. The prince offering advancement, in exchange for complicity in his schemes. Then I had accepted out of ambition and naivety. Now I understood the poison hidden in the honey. "A wise heir honors those loyal to his father," I observed. "It speaks well of his own character and the stability of his future reign." The prince's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course, but there is loyalty and there is vision. My father maintains traditions that have served their purpose and should now evolve. Change requires men willing to look forward rather than backward." "Change without foundation leads to collapse," I countered. "The wise builder ensures the ground is solid before erecting new structures." For a moment, tension crackled between us. Then the prince laughed, breaking the moment. "Philosophy from a soldier. You continue to surprise me, Commander Joe. Let us return to camp before they send search parties." The rest of the hunt passed without incident, but I felt the prince's eyes on me often, reassessing, recalculating. When we returned to the capital, I sensed a shift in the court's attitude toward me. Subtle, but unmistakable. Whispers followed me through the palace corridors. Former allies found reasons to be elsewhere when I approached. When the prince fell ill 3 months after his elevation, the court physicians whispered of poison, slow-acting and untraceable. The emperor summoned me privately, his face gray with worry. "My son believes he has been poisoned," he said without preamble. "He names no one, but suspicion falls naturally on those who might gain from his death." "I serve the throne, Your Majesty," I replied carefully. "The prince's health is essential to the stability of the empire." The emperor studied me. "You do not ask if I suspect you." "Do you, Your Majesty?" He sighed heavily. "No, but others do." You would be wise to distance yourself from court until this matter resolves. I bowed deeply. As you command. For 7 days I remained in my home, sending trusted men to bring reports of the prince's condition. May watched me with growing concern as rumors spread through the capital, each more outlandish than the last. They say the prince speaks names in his fever, she told me on the 7th night. Names of conspirators who sought his death. And is my name among them? I asked calmly. She hesitated. No, but the families he names have ties to you through the military. This was different from my previous life. Then the prince had recovered and used the illness to purge his enemies. Now it seemed the poison was genuine, its effects more severe. On the 8th day, an imperial summons arrived. I was to present myself at the palace immediately, not as a suspect but as a witness. The prince had asked for me specifically. I found him in his private chambers, attended by physicians and guards. His once handsome face was sallow and sunken, his breathing labored. When he saw me, he dismissed the others with a weak wave. "Commander," he whispered once we were alone. "You knew, didn't you?" I approached his bedside cautiously. "Knew what, Your Highness?" "That they would betray me. My new allies, my noble friends." His laugh turned into a painful cough. "You warned me in your way." I remained silent, unsure of his intent. "Too clever to accuse directly," he continued, "but I see now what you meant about building on solid ground. I elevated men without testing their loyalty first." "Your Highness is unwell," I said carefully. "Perhaps these matters should wait until your recovery." He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "There will be no recovery, Commander. The physicians don't say it, but I see it in their eyes." His grip tightened. "I name them traitors, all of them. The Minister of Rights, Lord Feng, the Yan family, all who promised loyalty and delivered poison instead. Your Highness should speak these accusations to your father," I urged. "I have," he replied. "But I wanted you to know that I understand now. Power without wisdom is merely the opportunity to fail spectacularly." His eyes burned with fever. "You saw it when I did not." When I left the prince's chambers, the emperor himself waited in the antechamber, aged beyond his years by worry. "Did he speak to you of his accusations?" he asked without greeting. I nodded. "He named those he believes responsible for his condition. And do you believe him?" I considered carefully before answering. "I believe your majesty would be wise to investigate thoroughly before acting. Fever can distort perception." The emperor nodded slowly. "A measured response. Precisely what I expected from you, Commander Zhou." On his deathbed, surrounded by imperial guards and witnesses, the prince named those who had supplied the poison, his new allies, the very nobles who had hoped to rise with him. "They saw me as their path to power," he gasped, each word clearly causing him pain. "When I refused certain of their demands, they decided I had become an obstacle instead." The emperor wept openly as his son's breathing grew more labored. I stood at attention by the door, present as commander of the Imperial Guard but feeling like an intruder in this royal grief. The prince's eyes found mine across the room. "Commander Zhou," he called, his voice surprisingly strong. "Approach." I moved forward and knelt beside his bed as protocol demanded. "You alone warned me," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "Not in words, but in your caution." I was too proud to listen. "Your Highness honors me beyond my worth," I replied, equally quietly. His hand clutched at my sleeve. "Protect my father when I am gone. The same hands that poisoned me will reach for him next. With my life," I vowed, and meant it. The prince died before dawn. The empire shook with executions in the days that followed. The families he had named, once powerful nobles who had allied themselves with the prince, were decimated. Lords were beheaded, their sons exiled, their daughters sent to distant temples. Anyone connected to the named conspirators lived in terror of imperial justice. I returned home one evening to find our house shrouded in unusual silence. May sat in our chamber, pale as death, a crumpled message clutched in her hand. Lady Feng was executed at noon, she whispered. Her only crime was accepting a jade bracelet from the prince last spring. I said nothing, watching her tremble. They say the Minister of Rights is to be questioned tomorrow, she continued. His wife once poured tea for the prince at a gathering. Still, I remained silent. That night I heard her praying in the ancestral shrine, her voice breaking with fear. For the first time since my rebirth, I felt a pang of my old love for her. But I hardened my heart, remembering the frozen field where I had died alone. The next evening, May came to me dressed in white mourning silk, her beauty stark against the pale fabric. Her eyes were hollowed by fear. "They're coming for me," she whispered, falling to her knees. "The Imperial Censorate has my name on a list of those to be questioned. They believe I was part of the plot." I stood silently in our doorway. "Please," she begged, her forehead touching the floor. "I know I've been cold. I know I've been ambitious. But they'll execute me. You're the only one who can protect me now." I looked down at her, this woman who had abandoned me in another life, who had watched me be exiled without a word of protest, who had worn another man's jewels while I bled out on foreign soil. I lifted her chin with one finger. "And why would I do that?" "Because you loved me once," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly. "In another life, I died with your name on my lips while you wore another man's jewels." Her eyes widened with incomprehension, then fear, then something like awe. "You really have lived this before," she breathed. I stepped aside, letting her into our home. "I'll protect you from execution," I said, "but not from the consequences of your choices." That night, I reviewed the evidence I had gathered over the years, correspondence I'd intercepted, plans I'd discovered showing May's innocence in the assassination plot, but her complicity in smaller schemes against rivals at court. "You kept these?" she asked, staring at the collection of documents. "All this time?" "I remembered what happened before," I replied simply. "I prepared for every possibility." "What happened before?" she pressed, her voice barely audible. "In this other life you claim to remember." I met her eyes steadily. "You left me for the prince. You watched as I was exiled to the northern border for opposing his corruption. I died there, alone in the snow, still loving a woman who had forgotten me." She shook her head slowly. "That's not possible. No man can live two lives. And yet, here we are." I gestured to the documents before us, with me knowing exactly how events would unfold and preparing accordingly. As dawn broke, Imperial guards surrounded our house. The captain presented an arrest warrant bearing the Imperial seal. May clung to me, trembling. "Trust me," I whispered to her, before addressing the captain. "I request an immediate audience with His Imperial Majesty. I have evidence concerning the crown heir's death." The Emperor, gray with grief and rage, sat on his dragon throne as I knelt before him. I presented my evidence methodically. The prince's corruption, his conspiracies, and the limited extent of my wife's involvement. "She sought his favor, Your Majesty, as many did, but she had no hand in his death. Her crimes are of ambition, not treason." The Emperor studied me through narrowed eyes. "You defend the woman who would have betrayed you for my son?" "I defend justice, Your Majesty," I replied, "and mercy where it is deserved." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, his aged fingers tapping the throne's armrest. "You are an unusual man, Commander Zhou. Most would seek vengeance against an unfaithful wife." "Vengeance brings no peace, Your Majesty. I learned that lesson at great cost." "Exile," the Emperor pronounced the next day, "to the temple at White Cloud Mountain. She will live out her days in prayer and service." As they took her away, May looked back at me. "Why not let me die if you hated me so much?" I shook my head. "I never hated you, May. I just learned to love myself more." Her eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I had seen from her since our marriage. "Will you come to see me? At the temple?" "No," I said softly. "That chapter of our lives is closed." The emperor offered me rewards, gold, land, even marriage into a grateful noble family whose daughter had been spared by my testimony. I declined them all. "I request only command of the southern border, Your Majesty. I have had enough of court intrigue and northern winters." He studied me curiously. Most men would seize such rewards eagerly. "What drives you, Commander Joe, if not ambition or wealth?" "Peace," answered honestly, and the chance to write a different ending to my story. 5 years have passed since then. I live simply in my command post overlooking green valleys, warm, peaceful, alive. My soldiers respect me, the local people prosper, under my protection, and I sleep without nightmares of ice and blood. Sometimes I dream of snow and death and her face above me. Sometimes I wake reaching for a woman who betrayed me in another lifetime. But these ghosts grow fainter with each passing season. Word comes occasionally from the capital. The Lady Monk of White Cloud Mountain has become known for her calligraphy. Beautiful poems about love and regret and second chances squandered. The emperor himself has requested her works for the imperial collection. I never read them. Some lessons need not be learned twice. But on nights when the moon hangs full above my southern fortress, I sometimes wonder if she ever truly understood that I didn't save her out of weakness or lingering love, but because dying as the man I had become was better than living as the man I had been. Last autumn, a merchant from the capital brought news that the emperor had established a new dynasty name, marking the formal beginning of a new era for the empire. With the prince's death and no direct heir, he had adopted a distant nephew as his successor, a quiet, scholarly young man known for his wisdom rather than ambition. They say the emperor consulted the Lady Monk of White Cloud Mountain before making his decision, the merchant told me over tea. Her counsel is valued even in exile. I smiled at that. May had always been clever, always able to find advantage even in disadvantage. Perhaps in this lifetime she had found a way to channel her ambition toward wisdom rather than mere advancement. A letter arrived last winter, sealed with the mark of White Cloud Temple. I recognized May's elegant calligraphy on the outside. For days I left it unopened on my desk, uncertain whether to destroy it unread or face whatever words she had sent across the distance between us. Finally, on a clear, cold morning, I broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. It contained only a few lines. "In another life, I chose power over love, and lost both. In this life, you chose justice over vengeance and saved us both. My prayers are with you always, though our paths never cross again." I burned the letter that night and scattered the ashes to the wind, not out of anger or bitterness, but as final acceptance that some stories are better left concluded. I walk, among my soldiers now scarred, whole, and unburdened, because loving her was the last war I ever lost.